Hi everybody, welcome to another episode of The Founders Shed. My name's Hamlyn, I'm here with Shane. And second episode. So for those of you tuned into our first episode, thank you very much. We appreciate that. And this episode's a little different. We're on Zoom, so you can actually see our pretty faces now if you're watching the video. So here we are, number 2. We took our own advice from the last episode and just got started. But this episode is all about how it's okay to fail. And, what does that mean? Why is failing? Why we have to do this?
I'm excited for this one because it's one of those things that I've struggled with personally for years, accepting failure. Whether it's on a personal level, a sporting level, business level, whatever, failure is just so defined, and it's only in the last kind of year or so that I've understood this kind of concept of it's okay to fail and actually picking out the value of things from what you've done and accepting that failure is okay. Like if failure isn't like a big hard stop, you can learn so much from it. So I'm excited to get going on this one.
Yeah, I think it's interesting you say that because I think a lot of people listening, they might be thinking like failure, that's a big word. And I guess we kind of need to start with what do we mean when we talk about failure? Like, what does that mean to different people? I think when, as humans, we're programmed not to fail. We're taught not to fail because failure is not succeeding. Failure is not surviving. It goes against our survival instinct, which is what drives us. That's what, makes us want to earn money and have good quality lives. So when we think of failure, it's this idea that we hit a brick wall and we make the leap of faith and we just fall down the chasm.
It's that disappointment almost that's attached to failure, isn't it? Like you always see failure as a negative, right? And essentially what we see when we see failure is that there can only be one winner, and that's not always the case, right? Like coming second or third, for example, can still be a big success. So quick story from me, like for those of you who know me, I used to play professional ice hockey, and I played in world championships. Now, most people on the face of it, if I told you that I had 2 gold medals and a bronze medal at world championship levels, most people would hold the gold medal up as the successful one, right? For me, the bronze medal was the successful one because we had 2 gold medals at Division 2, but a bronze medal in Division 1, right? So on the face of it, people just go gold versus bronze. But actually, when you start looking at the details and the little wins, so for us as a country, for Great Britain as a country in the World Championships of Ice Hockey, just being in Division 1 was a good start because we typically flipped between Division 2 to Division 1 for many years. We were too good for Division 2, not good enough for Division 1. So we kind of couldn't find where we should sit. Then my age group came around and we got to a point where we were not only able to kind of get promoted to Division 1, stay in Division 1, and then the year after that, we got the bronze medal at Division 1.
Right.
So although we failed in winning the tournament and we came third out of 6, that was like the biggest success that you could have come across.
Well, yeah, because you're looking at it as an overall improvement.
Exactly.
And I guess that's kind of what we're going to talk about it more is like your mindset. And sometimes something that feels like a failure in that moment is crushing. But then once you move past it, you realize that you needed to fail because if you'd have won that battle, you might not have tried so hard the next time. And I think that kind of, it's interesting that we're already talking about winning and losing because I think for a lot of people, that's what failure is. It's losing. It's losing a battle. But sometimes that I think my experience, and if I was going to tell a story from my past about a failure, I would say it's more about something not meeting my expectations, maybe me not meeting my own. So for example, when I was at school, I loved art. I loved drawing. I did GCSE art, and I did badly in it. I got didn't get on with my teacher. I think I got a D, GCSE. Bear in mind, this is what I wanted to go on and do. And in that moment, it felt like failure. It was like I'm being told by my teacher and by my grade that I'm not good at this. Like I'm failing. And then it was only, a few years later when I kind of started self-teaching myself to do design. And fast forward to now, that's a crucial part of my job. That is what I do.
Massive. Look at what you've built with VANHEROES and all our past stuff and all the projects you do now. It's massive.
Yeah, absolutely. But it took all of that time and all of that building myself back up to get to that realization. Actually, no, I can do this. I just was being expected to do it a certain way, and that's why I couldn't do it. That's why I couldn't make my teacher happy. That's why I didn't get an A, because I wasn't fitting into that box. And that's fine. The people that did well in that, they understood that. And but for me, it was an important learning, and at the time it felt like a loss. It was like, I'm not going to be able to do this thing that I like. But actually, I was trying to do a version of it. And I think that also does speak to a little bit to the flaws of education when it comes to a subjective subject like art. But we won't go into that now.
It's a subject I'd love to cover in future.
Yeah, for another day, I think. But so it's interesting that your story is sort of a sporting one about winning and losing, and mine is more about me being like dead set on this thing, and then I get there and it's not what I imagined it to be at all, and in a way it kind of demotivates you or derails you. I think both of those are examples of, in my mind, of failure, where you're expecting it to be a clean ride and it's not.
Yeah, but let's talk about the values that you can get then from a journey. So we're talking about it being okay to fail, and we've defined what failure can be to people. But actually, for me, if you can draw the positives and the value out of something, then you haven't failed, because you've still taken a step forward. I mean, let's kind of draw on some of the learnings we've had from VANHEROES, for example. So VANHEROES, in the traditional sense, for some people, where they're going, oh, have you sold it for 60 million, or all these kind of crazy stuff, that's what they determine as success. Whereas for us, from the off, we were in it to learn and to develop. And so from that sense, VANHEROES has been a massive, massive success. So to some people, on their view, they see it as, oh, well, you've closed the doors on it, and it's changed and it's done this. For me, I'm going, well, actually, in that time span of 2 years, the journey that we've been on personally to develop our skills and improve ourselves and our knowledge and our decision-making skills and all those things are massive, massive wins. I don't know what you think about that, but certainly for me, the trajectory that I've been on, it's been insane.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I think we were both there for that journey, and we both feel the same coming out of it. And for those that don't know, so we talk a little bit about VANHEROES, which was the startup that Shane and I were both founders of. And we'd been running the startup for about 2 years. And then the end of last year, we made the difficult decision to bring it to an end. And the reasons for that were a combination of things sort of mounting against us, and also us realizing that we had limited options for where we could take it in the future. And we ultimately made a decision we were going to use our time and skills on something else, like this podcast, for example. And you said something there, Shane, which I think is really important. You said, in your view, we've been successful. And I think that is really key to how you define failure, is also how do you define success? Because by that logic, if your idea of success is to build a company and sell it, and you set out and you don't do that, then you probably will feel like you failed. And I think that when we started Van Heroes, that was the ambition. That was what we wanted to do, because that's what we'd seen. You know, we'd never done that before. We were both working full-time jobs. We'd never, I don't think, started a proper company, let alone like a startup or a tech startup. And when we were, and I remember we were both watching Silicon Valley a lot. And you know, you even though that is a comedy, and if you haven't watched Silicon Valley, I highly recommend it. It's hilarious, but it's also just a great sort of comic portrayal of, like, satirical almost, of like startup culture in America. But so I remember we were watching Silicon Valley, and we were almost like using what they were doing as like a guide for what we should be doing, because even though it was a comedy, it's like we knew that these companies out there that have you know, massive IPOs and stuff, that they do things a certain way, and we need to be like that, and we need to have a cap table, and we need to you know, prioritize this over this. And but we didn't know any of this stuff. We just started. But that was the goal, was to build up this company and sell it, and, you know, go buy a yacht or whatever young entrepreneurs do. And I think I don't know exactly when it happened, but the longer we were building that business for, the more we realized that in order to get to that point, we had to invest so much in the company itself. We had to really believe in it. We had to make decisions about what we wanted the company to be, what we didn't want it to be, how we wanted our culture to be, how we wanted to enlist people. And that kind of, over time, that changes your perspective of things. And I think by the time we got to the end, ultimately, so Van Heroes is all to do with logistics and moving things. It's, you know, man and van, and also a little bit of delivery as well. And I think by the end, we'd had some discussions, we'd done some investor readiness courses, we had worked with a really good mentor through Barclays Eagle Labs, and we'd kind of come to this realization that we couldn't get investment unless we started paying our drivers poorly, or unless we stopped giving our customers the level of service that we kind of prided ourselves on. And in that moment, we kind of had to choose between, well, do you want to really, you know, slice down those margins and try and pull as much as you can, or do you want to just, you know, what are you going to do? Because they were saying, no, you know, what you're doing as an ethical company is great, but investors aren't going to like it. It's like fair trade chocolate. You know, people didn't want to spend £5 on a bar of chocolate when it first came out. So yeah, and I think we made the right decision, because we realized that our goal was to build an ethical business. And
yeah, and I think it's really important as well to understand that you can change your goals as you move through something, right? Like, you know, just because you have this goal at the start that says, this is what I think success looks like, and that's your very first view, it's okay to be a bit agile about it and move this on the fly. And I think that's the realization that we came up with as well, actually, is over time, we changed that view of, actually, we're going to build this massively successful tech startup that's going to make us millionaires. We changed that goal to, actually, what can we gain out of this to develop ourselves? And, you know, if I look at you, for example, Hamlyn, I've seen you move from somebody who was a very good designer to somebody who's now a fantastically rounded marketer who can design and consult and do so much more. Like, there's so many more strings to your bow. You're not just boxed into this little thing anymore. You've understood that you can, you know, you've got all these skills that you can offer, and you're not just confined to, oh, I'm a graphic designer.
It's funny, actually, you say that, because when we started, if you remember, my original title was CMO. Yeah. So I was the marketing guy, and then towards the end, I was more of a MD, because you know, wearing so many hats. We both were, you know, and so the way that we were working changed, the relationship changed, the focus changed, and when it came to the big difficult decision of, do we keep going or do we stop, we, you know, it was difficult. We had to really think about it, but we kind of also realized that we could keep that process going of learning and evolving by moving on to something else. Although it felt like a defeat in a way, and it was sad to end the project, in a way it took for us, I think it took courage to do that and say, we need to kill this idea so we can move on, because we would have done ourselves a disservice otherwise.
I think the key thing is, right, is that failure, and we keep going back to this, but failure is in most people's eyes like a hard stop, whereas actually it should be an evolution. Accepting failure is actually the point where you go, okay, I'm ready to divert my attention and move forward in a different direction, right? Like, it's not about a straight arrow. Sometimes you have to find a wall to get over it. Like, you know, and I think that's really key, because I look at where we are, for example, we could have kept going with VANHEROES for a couple of years, but were we the right people to take that forward, you know, in that time, etc.? No, we've done what we needed to do with it. We've got it to a great space. But for us to keep moving forward as well, we needed to find something new. And that's why, you know, this wasn't failure for us. This was evolution. This was us going, okay, we're now ready to move into this and take this on and do this. You know, so for me, VANHEROES was never a failure. We learned so much. It's now put us in a great space to pass on information via this podcast, to focus our attention into entrepreneurship workshops and teach other people that, you know, there's a great opportunity for businesses to encourage innovation from within, and kind of keep those guys alive and keep those guys moving forward. So, you know, that to me isn't failure. You know, yes, it's okay to fail, but that definition of failure shouldn't be boxed into, okay, you've not completed this. It should be, you've got this far and now you're going to move this way, you're going to move that way. It's about being agile.
Yeah. Agile certainly comes into it, and in a way, what you're saying is that failure are just a series of lessons that we need to learn, and if you don't learn from that lesson, you'll keep receiving that lesson until you learn it.
Yeah. Well, let's look at someone who's a really famous entrepreneur, right? So Elon Musk, right? Everyone knows of Elon Musk with Tesla and SpaceX, etc. I was reading something about him the other day, and, you know, like, he's not a rocket scientist or anything like that, but with SpaceX, he's now just completed the first ever kind of launch and re-landing of a rocket. Right? You know, and this is someone who's not got that background, but he surrounds himself with the right people to do it. And his view of failure is fantastic, really, because he learned a lesson. I think there was 3 or 4 different times that he tried this before, and each time it failed, right? But what he did was he learned from those lessons, built on it to the next model, learn, built, reiterate, and eventually he's got to a point where he's deemed a success. But I guarantee if you ask him, and, you know, maybe one day we'll be lucky enough to have him on the podcast, right? But if you ever ask him, he will tell you that they weren't failures; they were just lessons learned.
Yeah, there's a similar thing with, I think it's like Edison. There's like a really famous quote where he's saying something along the lines of, you know, I may have one success, or like it may have taken one success, which would be like, you know, inventing the light bulb, but what you don't see are the thousands of failures that it took to get to that success.
Well, we don't talk about them, do we?
Oh,
how many people talk about how many times they fall off a horse before they tell you about when they've jumped over something?
Well, it's like when you get a job. How many people post that they've got a new job, but they're not going to tell you how many rejections they got before they got that job?
Yeah.
You know, but when I think about like job, actually applying for a job is a perfect example of this. How many times do you apply for a job and you're thinking, this is the perfect job for me, I need this job, this is exactly right, and then you get rejected for it. It's awful. You get through it, you pick yourself back up, you apply for another job, that comes in, you end up working there, and then you're starting at your job thinking, I can't believe I nearly worked at this other place. Like, I can't imagine working in. Do you know what I mean? It's like when you look back on your path and your journey. Well, the other thing is, and I think about this a lot. I can't remember who sent it to me. I might have read it somewhere, but and it was this is something that helped me a lot with decision making, but also justifying things not working, like not getting that job, whatever. Which is, you'll never know the alternative. So if you have two doors and you can only choose to go through one, whichever door you go through, you're never going to know the alternative. It's like if you're buying someone a Christmas present and you can't decide whether to buy them a blue jumper or a red jumper. Like, in that moment, whatever you choose, that's going to be the present that they open. They're not going to see the alternative. They're never going to know the alternative. And you're by choosing one, you're actively leaving one behind you, and you probably never think about it again, ever.
I get reminded about that constantly because my wife normally tells me what to buy her for Christmas. So if I buy the wrong color, I'm in a whole world.
Yeah.
But no, yeah. You're right. You know, you have those two paths, right? And you don't know which one's going to be right or wrong. But I guess the point is, you just keep moving forward, like learn from those mistakes.
And I guess that's what that is about. Is it's saying that actually there aren't two paths. There's only one. There's only ever one. You're only ever going to be able to walk down one of those paths. You're not. It's like, you know. So once you realize that, it's like, as long as this path gets me to the next door, like, it doesn't really, you know. And I think that's why mindset is so important. Like, when you go into these things, like, the people that do really well are the people that cope with failure well. They're the people that are able to move forward, to justify it, to, you know, if they lose, they're sportsmanlike. You know, if it's a game, they're sportsmanlike. They study what they did wrong, they improve.
Well, it builds resilience as well, right? Like, you know, which is, it's a massive trait that we should all kind of be thinking about and working on. And this kind of ties in with the subject of failure, because, you know, that resilience that we build makes us better. You know, like, taking something on the chin and being able to carry on walking forward is fantastic. Accepting when you're in the wrong is, you know, a massive part. And we've had this, you know, with VANHEROES, and, you know, we won't talk too much about the VANHEROES stuff, but with VANHEROES, we made mistakes. Like, you know, we put money into some absolutely crazy things that we thought were a priority at the time. I remember spending £250 to get an SEO audit done, right? and at the time we were like, this is what we need, right? Yeah. we need to get this SEO done, and we need to work all this out. And then we spent that money and we did this. And then after, we went, okay, let's just take this and just park it over here. We did nothing really with that SEO audit. It was a complete waste of our time. It was a waste of our money. It didn't matter. But the learnings that I got from that then made us go, okay, next time we're going to spend money, is it for the right reasons? Do we need this? You know, what's the purpose of this? And we ended up scrutinizing almost every penny off the back of that. And it wasn't about scrutinizing it, but it was just about taking that lesson learned about, well, what's the value of us doing this over spending our time on this? And that's a really key thing for me. So, you know, again, it's just that resilience of learning from those pieces and just taking them forward.
I think thinking about this, I think there's almost like two levels to, like, failure. And I think that one that you know, that I understand, and you've almost got like these sort of light, superficial failures, like thinking about like agile and developing. It's commonly understood that you have to make mistakes to get to the finished product. It's like, think about NASA. They didn't just build a rocket ship and then it went to the moon. Like, they had to endure tests and fires and explosions and things malfunctioning. But every time something happened, they fixed it, and it evolved, just like how, you know, we evolve. It tries to go down a path and it's like, nope, not there. Tries to go down another path. This is working. Let's keep going down here. That's how life works. So as you move through life, it's got to be the same. But those, coming back to the point of a superficial failure, I think when you're talking about development and calculations and science, you know, you plot a trajectory and it's not right, so you put another trajectory. I think when you're used to working in an agile way and you're building a product or a service, and you're failing fast, which is the teaching of Agile, isn't it? It's like, if you're going to mess it up, hurry up and get on with it and mess it up so you can learn how not to do it and refine it. I think that when you're working with that mindset, you train yourself to deal with failure well, because you in a way, you kind of emotionally objectify it. You go, well, it's a failure. I'm not happy or sad about it. I'm just identifying it as, it didn't go the way I wanted to, let's fix it. Didn't go the way I wanted to, let's fix it. And you almost, like a machine, just move through and sort it out until it works. And then when it does work, you then become a human again, and you're like, yay. You know, anyone who does like coding will know that feeling. Then that is the reason you do that. Is, you know, those hours you pour over your code and you're like, what is wrong with this code? It should be working. And then you finally realize you put a comma somewhere or something stupid, and bing, just works.
It's funny, like I for years I literally used to get nervous and anxious about kind of presenting something to somebody, right? And I don't mean presenting to a big audience, but let's say, you know, I was tasked with doing a piece of work and somebody said, oh, can you go and do this on PayPal, or can you do this on Stripe, or whatever, right? Like whatever that task was. Even if I'd done that task, I'd feel anxious and nervous to go and present that to somebody, because I think that they would then pick out the failures from within that and be like, okay, well, you've done this, but you've actually not fully done this. And it's like, yeah, well, okay, what is success? So what I'm thinking of as an example is when I used to work at another company years ago, and we had some disputes raised on a payment, on a couple of payments, and we're probably talking about £5,000 or £6,000 worth. Now, I took my own initiative to try and fix that. I wasn't asked to do it. I went away and I went into Stripe. Actually, I went to Stripe and I raised disputes and I built evidence, etc. Stripe just turned around and in a very kind of big corporation fashion, and just went, computer says no. You know, they probably didn't even read the cases that I put together where I proved that these people were scammers and all the rest of it. And they just said, computer says no. I saw that as a failure, even though it wasn't something I was tasked at. I then felt really, really anxious about going to present that information back to the owner of the business, because I saw it as a failure, and I thought, well, these can judge me and do that. Was actually what I should have done is gone, okay, what I've learned from this is the fact that they're not even going to, you know, look at this case if I just put it through this way. What I need to do is find a human I can actually speak to properly, and you know what. So the learnings were there, and it built me resilience. But at the time, I felt super anxious about that. But now, knowing what I know now, that wasn't a failure. That was just a situation. I couldn't change that situation, but what I have done is I've learned what to do in the future.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And that that kind of links up with the second part of what I was trying to say, which is you have those superficial little failures that you can almost be a machine about. And, you know, whether it's like it's more like corrections, right? Like prompted corrections that you have to do, like the fail fast stuff. And then there's things where you can't fail fast on so well. And those are the bigger failures where it feels like it really rocks you, and it's like emotional. And I think that's it. Like the more emotion attached to that failure, the harder it is. Like if you've been gunning for something for like a year and it doesn't happen, that's a lot more crushing than like making something going, oh, that's not working. Because it's like the level of investment and the return on that investment, you're just like, oh, it's not what you anticipated. And that's kind of like what you're saying is you almost make a bigger thing out of it because you're thinking ahead like 4 or 5 steps. You know, you're saying you had that conversation with Stripe, and if the buck stopped with you, it would be much easier for you to just like keep going until you sort it. But because you had to then go back and report it to someone, it almost like inflates the size of the failure, because they then have to comprehend your inability to do something that someone else didn't do.
Mhm.
And then that then makes you worry about, oh, my boss is going to think I'm useless and I'm going to lose my job, and then I'm not going to have to pay for my bills. And it, like, humans do that. Like, we compound and we get anxious about things and we catastrophize. That's part of negative automatic thinking. It's what we do to protect ourselves, because we're wired, our brain is wired to stop us from taking risks and stop us from doing things because it wants to keep us alive. But I think that when you are able to think about things objectively and be logical and understand that actually those are just thoughts, like, I'm not going to get fired. I just need to be honest and say, well, this is what's happened. What are we going to do about it? And as long as your attitude, whenever you meet a failure or a problem, is like, how do we fix it? How do we solve it? You know, as long as that comes through.
Yeah. So let's. I think we're coming up to probably about the half an hour mark on this.
Yeah, I think we're like 32.
So how about we just tie this up then with linking it back into the first podcast, right? So this podcast has obviously been all about it's okay to fail. The first one's been about, just start, right?
Yeah.
The two are intertwined. So a lot of the reasons people don't start is because they're scared of failure, right? So if I think about, like, when we started VANHEROES, the very first thing that I did, I toyed with the idea for months and months and months before I eventually, because I was worried about failing, I was like, well, I don't have the money to start this, I don't have the skills to start this, I don't even know how to design a product, let alone build it, and I can't afford to buy anyone to it. So I was worried about failing before I'd even started, right? But actually, when I stuck the stake in the ground and I registered the company, I then kind of made a commitment to myself that I would find a way to do it. And I wasn't afraid of failure then. I was excited about the ability to build something, and it completely changed and flipped everything on its head.
Yeah, so if we were going to answer, because there'll be people who listen to our first episode and they go, oh, Hamlyn and Shane, you're saying just start. You make it sound so easy, but what I've got to do is really difficult because this and this, or there'll be something that you're creating that'll stop you from wanting to start that. What do you think, Shane, is the most important thing, the most important attribute in yourself to deal with and cope with failure?
I think for me, it's about belief in yourself and understanding the value that you're able to create. So don't put the pressure on meeting this big, massive piece at the top. Break it down into the small wins, right? So, you might have this big overarching goal where you go, okay, I want to build a really successful, massive company. But if you're constantly looking at that, you're setting yourself up for failure. What you actually need to do is break that down into the milestones and go, okay, what do I need to do to achieve this little goal down here? And when you start to build up those goals, your self-worth increases, your confidence increases, all these massive, massive things start coming out of you. And that will eventually get you to that goal that you want to go. Or you move on the journey to find something different. And that's okay too.
Yeah, absolutely. I kind of echo that. I think I would say something similar, that it's it's definitely about your mindset and your willingness. What you have to understand is that the person that's going to complete these goals isn't you right now. It's a future version of you, and that future version of you knows more than you do now. And the person that reaches that goal they're going to have so much more experience than you do now. So have faith in your future self that you'll be able to navigate this. Like, you don't know what's around the next corner, but that's fine. You don't have to worry about that. Your job is not to predict what's going to happen. Your job is just to do it, and then when it happens to you, take note and go, right, this happened.
I really like that as well, because you're right. You don't know what's around that next corner, but all you can do is prepare yourself for what you can see in front of you. So get to the corner, and then when you get to that corner, take a little look around, prepare yourself, walk around that corner, and start that new path. And just keep doing that same thing. Break it down into little pieces, and accept that things will change. It's not failure to change path.
Yeah, absolutely. That's the other thing. Like you think of completing a big goal like climbing a mountain. You don't start by just walking, like aiming for the top and walking up there. You walk up to a checkpoint and then you move across. But it might be that you kind of get halfway up and you realize actually that's not the top of the mountain. The top's over there, and then you change course, or like you say, that isn't failure. That's just adapting. That's what we all have to do. You might start a business and 6 months down the line you go, actually I don't want to be selling this, I want to be doing this instead, or I want to change it into a charity, or because things will happen to you. Things will happen to the world.
Yep, exactly.
And like think about all the businesses that completely changed in 2020, or started offering services they didn't offer before, or like things change. You can't predict that. No one could predict what happened last year. But no one's mad at anyone for not predicting that. It's one of those things. I think they call it a black swan event.
Right.
Which is like,
I think there are a few people who are mad, but
there are people who are mad, but like, how can I mean,
you can't be mad.
From a business perspective, you're not looking at your next year forecast going, well, what would these numbers look like if we, if an asteroid hits the Earth? You just don't ask those questions. You'd be there all day. You've got the aim is to keep moving forward. And one last thing for me, you mentioned about self-worth.
Mm-hmm.
You said that's another important thing. And so yeah, I think mindset, like that'll help you move forward. And then self-worth, like knowing that you are good enough to do this. Like you don't doubt your ability. And I go back to my experience with getting a D in art at school. That could easily have made me never pick up a pencil and paper again and draw. But I love doing it, so I wanted to do it. When you apply for jobs and you get rejected, it's hard. Like you feel like I'm not good enough to work at this company. And it's only when you work at a company and you experience how they hire people that you go, wow, it would be so easy to fall through the cracks and to not get a job here. Mm-hmm. And honestly, like I used to think when I was younger, like I'd send an application off and every application would be read by someone, and someone would have a big stamp and go rejected and throw it in a pile. But the reality is that's just not what happens. Usually it all goes through into a big inbox and someone will just scroll through and just at random go, this one. And they'll read it and go, yeah, seems like they can do the job. I mean, I might be exaggerating, but what the point I'm trying to make is when I actually experienced it from the other side, I was like, wow, it would be so easy to fire off an application and not, because all of those messages in that inbox is someone waiting to hear back. And like, if you're not physically able to go back to all of those people and say, sorry, you weren't successful, you have to have a pretty good understanding of your self-worth to be able to go, well, I didn't get an offer for it. That's fine because I'm applying for this, I'm applying for that. I knew I could do the job. It's their loss. It's like, let's just move forward with it. So I think the self-worth bit is crucial because we talk about not knowing what's coming around the next corner. And when you get to it and it's not what you expect, your self-worth is the thing that allows you to go, I can do this next bit. It's like when you play sport in a game, you might be losing that game, but you still have to believe in yourself as a player. Like, I've got the ability to win this game. I've got the ability to score that goal or defend this. Or
even if you don't know how you're going to do it.
Even if you don't know how you're going to do it, like you don't know what the score is going to be halfway through the game when you start. You just don't know, but you know that you can give yourself all the way through that game. And that's ultimately what you want to be able to do. You want to look back on it at the end, whether you won, lost, failed, whatever it is, you want to be able to look back on it and go, I'm happy with the way I did that. I gave everything. I tried as hard as I could, and, I am where I am. But looking back on it, I wouldn't do it any differently. And I think that's how both me and you feel looking back on VANHEROES. We don't see it as a failure because we were very clear about what success is to us, and we think we were successful. We may have failed at doing that one thing, which was building up the company and getting investors and selling it. But as time went on, that became less and less of the big goal. And this thing that we didn't even think of before about building an ethical company and supporting entrepreneurship and learning all this stuff about ourselves, like we didn't know that was going to happen, and it happened. And now we're really grateful for that.
Yeah, exactly. So look, let's wrap it up. I think it's really important that we've had this discussion on this subject, because I think failure is something that everybody's afraid of, right? Like I mentioned a minute ago, people are afraid to start because of failure. So whatever
That's okay. That's okay to be afraid.
Exactly. It's okay to be afraid. Like,
what makes us human.
Yeah, exactly. You'll find a way to do it. So you know what? Just start. Don't be afraid. It's okay to fail. Like,
and we didn't say this last time, but if you do ever want to get in touch with either of us, you can find us both on LinkedIn. We'd both be happy to share experiences, or if you have ideas of a business you want to start, or projects, or something you're in the middle of that you're struggling with, please reach out. We'd be more than happy to give some advice or support, or just listen.
Yeah, and I actually had someone reach out last week, who I've now started to help and advise, who's a young guy starting his own company.
Oh, and
really exciting to be able to help that next generation. So yeah, keep coming at us, guys. We're more than happy to help as and where we can. All right.
Cool, thank you. I think that'll do it for this week. So thank you to everyone that's joined us. And if you've been watching, I hope you've enjoyed our beautiful faces. We'll see you very soon.
Thanks, everyone.
Take care.